Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to see you here for this wake-up call. Sheldon Whitehouse and I started this task force, this climate action task force, _action, action in the Congress, action outside the Congress, because we see climate change occurring before our eyes. And we're very dedicated to the notion that when Congress wakes up to it, we'll be able to have an impact and reverse the trend so that disaster isn't what's waiting for our grandchildren and our children. I'm so proud to tell you that 18% of the Senate is part of this. I will quickly go through the names, and you'll hear from a lot of them today. Some may be joining us. I'll go through the names. Boxer, Whitehouse, Cantwell, Menendez, Cardin, Sanders, Klobuchar, Udall, Shaheen, Merkley, Franken, Blumenthal, Schatz, Murphy, Heinrich, King, Markey, and Booker. Climate change is a dangerous threat to our nation, to our planet. It's a catastrophe that's unfolding before our eyes. And many of you sat down in my office with Senator Whitehouse, and we gave you kind of a backgrounder as to why we're doing this. And we told you then, our goal is to wake up the Congress. And we're not going to lay out today everything we're going to do, but in the coming weeks and months, you will see us have an impact on this. I'm so proud of the people who have joined. Each of them is dedicated to using his or her bully pulpit in the Senate to wake up the Congress. We're very realistic politicians. We understand that the makeup of Congress now is making it very difficult for us to pass climate change legislation. But we will not sit back and give up, but we will raise the visibility of this issue with the intent of changing minds around here. And every one of these terrific senators is going to approach this in his or her own way, which you will hear. So I will just go through in my remaining minute the fact that a new peer-reviewed study that was published in the journal Nature finds that unless we reverse the situation in terms of carbon pollution, the most severe predictions of temperature rise will occur by the end of the century. That's 7-degree increase Fahrenheit by the end of the century. Now, in my home state, people expect me, and they expect Senator Feinstein, and she's all over this issue as well, to step up and call attention to this issue and do something about it. Years ago, scientists told us in California to expect the following: higher temperatures, floods, droughts, extreme weather, extreme wildfires, rising sea levels. And guess what? All of it is happening, and that's why in California we have a cap-and-trade system. That's why in California we have tough laws on carbon pollution. Future generations will look back at this moment, and they'll judge us by the decisions we make. And so expect us to act inside the Senate, outside the Senate, and expect us to be heard. And I will turn this over to Senator Whitehouse, this incredible co-chair, who has worked so hard, never ceasing to call attention to this issue. And Senator Whitehouse, I'm so pleased to co-chair this with you. And I don't think you need that, so push it over.
Move this aside.
Don't think you need it.
Well, this is a happy day to have such an expression of support and energy from a group of warriors here. We are indeed in a contest. We are in a contest that will affect the habitability of our planet for our children, our grandchildren, and we are involved in a contest that will affect the credibility of American democracy. If we can't get this right, if we're blown off course by special interest money and propaganda on an issue like this, that sends a terrible message to the world and to the future. So we are tired of waiting, and we are ready to fight. The evidence is clear. It's often actually undeniable. The science is sound. Indeed, most of it is certain. The public, importantly, is with us. to the point where young Republicans think that climate denial is ignorant, out of touch, and crazy. And the stakes, as I said, are very, very high. So we have agreed with one another that we are going to use all the tools at our disposal as senators, seeking amendments, using floor time, calling groups together, working with corporations, with universities, with the public generally, to raise the profile of climate. With that effort and using the tools at our disposal, we can bring forward the day when we do what actually needs to be done on this issue. There is a barricade of lies around Congress, and we have made it our joint pledge to break through that barricade of lies and finally do the work that the public demands. And I'm very, very proud to be with such a wonderful group of senators who are so committed to making this effort. So thank you, Barbara, for your leadership, and thank you to all my colleagues. And next up is Senator Cardin.
Well, let me thank Senator Boxer and Senator Whitehouse. There's certain points that we're going to continue to emphasize with the American people and with our colleagues in Congress. First, the overwhelming scientific evidence and broad consensus is that climate change is happening and that human activity is greatly accelerating it. 97% of climate scientists agree with that statement, and it has catastrophic impact. We've already seen some. Water level rises are increasing, representing a coastal state like Maryland. We see that. We see the impact of that. We see more wildfires, droughts, floods, extreme weather conditions. There are workable solutions to reduce greenhouse gases. We can change this. In the last 5 years, we've made some progress. We have. Thank you to the Obama administration. Their actions have made a difference. Thank you to Congress in stopping some of the anti-environmental riders that we stopped in the Senate, that we stopped the Democrats stopped the Republicans from doing, have helped. So we've seen cleaner energy sources, more conservation, CAFE standard increases, and public opinion supports our efforts. This caucus, what we have done is set up a climate action task force because we want to encourage the administration to take more action. We want to block the negative activities that come over, particularly from the House of Representatives, and we want to make incremental progress. We can. The Shaheen bill on buildings, advancing biofuels, and dealing with issues for tax credits and dealing with basic research. There are ways that we can make progress in this Congress. But as Senator Whitehouse said, we're going to fight lies with truth, and we now have the Climate Action Task Force. We are going to be actively engaged to bring these issues to the attention of the American people and our colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. Well done. Senator Sanders, followed by Senator Klobuchar.
Let me thank Senators Boxer and Whitehouse for their leadership on this very important issue. When I go back to Vermont, people ask me what world the United States Congress is living in. They understand that the overwhelming majority of scientists, this is not a debate. The scientific consensus is absolutely clear, not debatable. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating damage in this country and all over the world. Not a debate, a fact. What is the United States Congress doing to address what the scientific community says is the greatest crisis facing our planet? What is Congress doing? And the answer is we have done a little, but not enough. And what this effort is about is to demand that the United States Congress listen to the scientific community, listen to the American people, and start acting in a way that will tell our kids and our grandchildren that we are concerned about their future. And the various members here will be emphasizing different areas of focus, and that's great. Let me just mention one area that concerns me. And Senator Schatz and I are working on a letter that I believe will have a whole lot of senators on board. And this deals with a study done by Media Matters for America, which reported that Sunday news shows devoted all of 8 minutes of airtime in 2012 to coverage of climate change issues, which was actually a decrease from 9 minutes the year before. So here you have the scientific community telling us that climate change is the greatest crisis facing our planet, and the major networks on their important Sunday news shows have devoted all of 8 minutes to discuss that issue. That has got to change. As a nation, we may disagree about this approach or that approach, but if we don't get our act together and recognize the severity of this crisis, start that debate, come up with ideas to solve it, the planet that we're going to leave our kids and our grandchildren will be much less habitable and much more dangerous than the planet we have today. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that very first action item out of the task force meeting that we had. Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman Boxer, Senator Whitehouse, for bringing this group together. I think you can see we're serious, and we're serious about waking up Congress. I come from this with a little different perspective than my colleagues that spoke before. I want to make the point that this isn't just about coastal states. This isn't just about rising oceans. In the Midwest and in the Plains states, we've seen tremendous weather changes. And if you want to get a sense of our state, when you think about tornadoes, right, we're the home of the Judy Garland Museum. When you think about fires, there was a fire that almost took up my dad's hometown in northern Minnesota just recently. When you think about ice melting, my state is the home of the world's second biggest hockey puck, all right? So this matters to the Midwest. And as the Agriculture Committee last year, we actually heard testimony about the drought and what the money means and what this means to our economy. The 2012 drought, the worst on record since 1956, resulted in losses of more than $35 billion, most of which came from agriculture. So you talk to a farmer, they see it changing. You talk to a hunter or a fisherman, they see the changes. For us, the conservation and the way of life outdoors isn't just for fun. It's actually part of our economy. And when you show up in the middle of winter in Minnesota, like I did a few years ago, and 200 guys in snowmobile suits show up because they're concerned about what it's doing to snowmobiling and recreation, you know this isn't just an issue for the elite. This isn't just an issue for the East and the West Coast. This is an issue for the whole country. So I thank my colleagues for their leadership, and we look forward to waking up Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Senator Merkley, followed by Senator Franken.
Wake up, Congress, and wake up, America. Carbon pollution is a direct assault on our natural resource industries. I'll take examples regarding farming and fishing and forestry from my home state of Oregon, but these examples can come from virtually any state in the Union. On farming, changing rain patterns have resulted in the worst ever drought 3 times in the Klamath Basin within the last 13 years in my home state of Oregon. Or let's take fishing. Folks in Oregon like to fish for trout and certainly for our iconic salmon. But when you have smaller snowpacks in the Cascades, you have smaller and warmer streams affecting that fishing. Or let's take our oyster industry, where the oyster seed, the baby oysters on which the entire industry depends, are having trouble being produced. And that's because of higher levels of acid in the ocean, the carbonic acid that comes from the oceans absorbing carbon dioxide. Or let's turn to our forests. Drier weather combined with more lightning strikes has produced terrible forest fires. Summer before last, the worst in 100 years, and heavy forest fire season year after year. Not to mention the pine beetle, which is not being killed off as it was before by very cold winter days, and therefore is ravaging more and more acres, thousands of acres across our state. A draft study from the Department of Energy says that the western forest can be largely devastated by the year 2100 with a combination of fire and pine beetles. So let's wake up and realize this is not an urban issue. This is not a Democratic or a Republican issue. This carbon pollution is an attack on our natural resource industries of fishing, forestry, and farming. We're all in this together, and we need to take it on.
Thank you so much, Senator. Well said. Senator Franken, welcome.
Well, as you can see from who's assembled here, this doesn't just involve the East and West Coast, it also involves Minnesota. Let me emphasize some stuff that's already been said in terms of this is costing us money now.
some people say, oh, by the turn of the next century, or turn of the century, this is going to be a huge problem. X amount of degrees, 9 degrees Fahrenheit, et cetera. It's costing us now. We received testimony in the Energy Committee 6 months before Sandy that rising sea level is going to cause much more damage when there are storm surges. And we had someone testify that we think that that even the subways in New York could get flooded. And it sounded like something from science fiction. Well, it happened 6 months later. And we know that storm cost us about $60 billion. It's happening now. We know the cost of the drought. You heard Senator Klobuchar talk about that. We know from what you heard from Senator Merkley about wildfires. I asked in testimony the director of the Forest Service, Chief Tidwell, about do your scientists tell you that climate change is exacerbating the wildfires, is causing the seasons to be longer, causing the fires to be bigger, causing the fires to be more intense? And he said, yes. And the bark beetle are killing all these forests. This is about now. I had a grandson born 7 months ago, and I realized pretty good shot for this guy to be around at the turn of the next century. I don't want the planet to be that so much warmer as it's being projected. But it's happening now, and we have to be talking about it. That's why we're here.
Thank you so much, and that's why we have to wake up Congress. And now a real leader on this issue, Brian Schatz, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Boxer, Senator Whitehouse. And to me, the most important aspect of this news conference is the number of people on this stage, that we could barely fit the number of United States senators who wanted to participate. And the way I view this is that Bernie and Barbara and Sheldon and others have been leading on this issue for many years, but we're here to provide some reinforcements in Eddie Markey and Cory Booker and Angus King and Martin and Chris and many of the rest of us. And Bernie's exactly right. The only place where there's a remaining debate about the reality of climate change is in the United States House and the United States Senate. There is a scientific consensus. And for those of us who won't believe the science, we will believe our own eyes, our own experience. And all of us in our home states are seeing the reality of climate change now. On the North Shore of Oahu, there is always big surf in the wintertime, but there has never been homes floating away into the ocean. On the South Shore of Oahu, you get your southern swells and the sands shift, but there has never been erosion to the extent that it is happening now. Climate change is real, climate change is urgent, and climate change is caused by humans, and that's what we're here to do, is to wake up Congress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator Murphy.
Well, thank you to Senator Boxer and Senator Whitehouse for their amazing leadership on this. I think my colleagues have done a great job of explaining the dire practical consequences of climate change, but as part of our efforts at persuasion, we also have to convince Republicans and those who would stand against the action that we're proposing of the electoral consequences of continuing to ignore this issue. We have to tell Republicans that if they ultimately want to stop the hemorrhaging from young voters in this country, they need to start paying attention to this issue, because only 3% of voters 18 to 34 don't believe that climate change is really happening. 80% of that same cohort of voters support President Obama's climate action plan, and 3/4 of young voters would vote against a member of Congress who stands in the way of that plan. Why do young people believe so strongly in action on climate? Well, first and foremost is because they believe science, not corporate propaganda. And second, they understand that if we don't make some changes right now with respect to the amount of carbon dioxide and methane and HFCs going into our atmosphere, they won't have the opportunity 20 years from now when they're in charge to correct this problem. The clock is ticking. And one of the most important reasons why young people support this agenda is they know that this group has to get results right now or it may be too late.
Thank you, Senator, very much. Senator Heinrich, Mexico.
As probably the only engineer up here, I want to say something a little bit different, which is it doesn't matter whether you believe in climate change or not. The data shows it's real. And in my home state, you can see it's real. The impacts it's having on our droughts, they're longer, they're more persistent. The resulting impacts that that's having on our economy, from our farmers to our recreationists, to the fact that water that comes from snowpack runs our economic engines in every major city in the state. And we are under more and more pressure every year because those snowpacks are smaller, and oftentimes they're never getting to the places where the water was traditionally used. We've seen huge changes to our forests in New Mexico, and many people don't realize we have millions of acres of conifer forests in New Mexico. And the latest research is showing that even if you take the bark beetle out of the equation, much of those conifer forests will not be able to survive to the end of this century. It will dramatically change the landscape that I and my kids and my family and my constituents think of as New Mexico. Places like Santa Fe and Silver City, you think of them as surrounded by these pinyon trees. That is changing. And for those of us who are on the Intel Committee and on the Armed Services Committees, this is going to change the world. It is going to create conflicts in places and increase those conflicts in very real ways that are going to have direct costs to those Americans who serve in uniform and to the parts of the country that have to think about the security ramifications of this year in and year out. When you think about Central Asia and the difference that we're seeing there in terms of snowpack and the melting of the glaciers, that is only going to increase the conflicts that we already have in an incredibly volatile region. And when you think about the people that will be displaced in low-lying areas in Southeast Asia, it adds a lot of fuel to an already to a world where we have about as much conflict as we can stand right now. So these things have very real costs. They have very real costs to our economy, and they are very serious issues. And I think that it is far past time that we start to take them on head on.
Thank you, Senator. Senator King, followed by Senators Markey and Booker.
Everything you need to know about this issue can be embodied in the Maine rototeller rule. The Maine rototeller rule is if you borrow your neighbor's rototiller, you always give it back to him or her in as good a shape as you got it and with a full tank of gas. We have the planet on loan. We don't own it. We have it on loan from future generations. And there's a lot of talk around here. I was presiding yesterday. There's a lot of talk about children and grandchildren and debt and deficit. The most solemn responsibility we have is to leave our descendants with the planet in as good a shape or better than we found it. It's pretty straightforward. And for the life of me, as you'll notice, there's a partisan cast to this group. I can't understand why this is a partisan issue. Because it's a scientific issue. Light moves at 186,000 miles a second. That's not a debatable issue. The temperature's going up. That's not a debatable issue. Here's 1 million years of carbon in the atmosphere. This chart answers two of the fundamental questions. One, is something happening? Yes. You can see it moved around for about 800,000 years. 800, 900,000 years. There was a variety from 150 to 250, but then it goes to 1860, 1850 when we started burning stuff in large quantities, and here's where it goes. One question is there more carbon in the atmosphere? Yes. Second question, are people have something to do with it? Yes, it's no coincidence. It started at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The third question is, so what? And the answer is, if you look at the last million years of data or 10 million years of data, you see an almost exact correlation between carbon in the atmosphere and temperature. And you know what? Congress may not know what's going on, but the Maine lobsters know what's going on because they're moving north. In the last 15 years, they have moved from Long Island Sound, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, to Portland area where I live, and now they're further up the coast. They're moving north. The Maine lobstermen are about as conservative a bunch of people as you can find on this planet, but they know that something's changing out there. They're finding seahorses in their lobster traps. That's change. It's climate change, and it's having a direct effect. It's affecting my lobstermen. It's affecting our forests. And I'll go back to the rototiller rule. We have a responsibility to turn the planet over to our children and grandchildren in as good or better shape as we found it. And right now, we're not meeting that responsibility. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why this is a partisan issue. We've really got to come to agreement on the facts. Then the question is, what do we do? And there will be disagreement on that. But we ought to get beyond saying what the science says. The science is undeniable. And it's important, and it's real, and it has impacts on real people's lives. To me, it's one of the most fundamental responsibilities we have around here, and I want to see us begin to meet it.
Thank you so much. That was so well said. And now, one of the great leaders on this issue for many, many years, Senator Markey.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. Thank Senator Whitehouse for organizing this very important action group. And the reason it's important is that scientists have warned us about the danger of climate change for years. The world is warming. Sea levels are rising. Storms like Sandy are more extreme. The oceans are more acidic. But the oil and the coal industries keep throwing up roadblocks to climate action. Their delay, their denial, their roadblocks are as bogus as a Fort Lee traffic study. There is no basis, in fact, for these roadblocks which they are creating to action here in Congress and across our country. This task force joins the Climate Change Clearinghouse, which I chair with Barbara and with Ron Wyden, so that we can now begin to tear down these barriers to action. We have an economic imperative to act on climate. We have a security imperative to act on climate. We have a moral imperative to act on climate change. It was 50 years ago this week that the U.S. Surgeon General told us that we were choking our lungs with cigarette smoke. But we overcame the denial of the tobacco industry of the dangers of smoking, and we beat the tobacco industry. It was 50 years ago that the moral clarity of the civil rights movement overcame the entrenched interest to outlaw racial segregation. 50 years from now, will the next generation say, we acted on climate change? I believe that they will. And that is why we are gathered here today, to make it quite clear that the Republican Party is in the grip of the oil and the coal industry, that is what is blocking real change. That is what is blocking action on science that will protect the public in the years ahead. It is the political grip of the oil and the coal industry interest on the House and Senate Republican leadership. The facts are with us. The moral authority is with us. The economic opportunities are with us. We have the chance to create a clean energy revolution that increases jobs by the hundreds of thousands as it cuts pollution. We must take the climate deniers to task for their obstinate, obdurate, oblivious opposition to the clean energy, job-creating opportunities to battle climate change. I look forward to working with my Senate colleagues on this task force and in all of the relevant committees in order to advance an agenda to combat the environmental, economic, and moral issue of our time.
Thank you so much. Last but absolutely not least, our latest star to our caucus,
Kid on the
Cory
block.
Booker, the kid on the block. And so happy you're here, Cory.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I want to thank particularly Senators Whitehouse and Boxer for their incredible leadership on this issue. It's said that the only thing necessary for evil to be triumphant is for good people to do nothing. The group behind me and some others are determined to do something, to act with determination, with defiance, with rebelliousness as necessary, and I'm happy to be a part. Thank you.
That is so good. Now, I just want to say what you can tell from these colleagues. Each of us brings a certain set of beliefs to this, and we have an organization that is not top down but bottom up. As a matter of fact, the first action we took was with the leadership of Senators Sanders and Schatz, this letter, plus other work we've been doing on riders and so on. But you are going to hear from us, and now we'll take questions. We won't take questions about anything else but this subject. If you have other questions for us, get us individually. Yes?
I just want to know, so you're saying wake up Congress. Do you feel like you still have work to do to wake up members of your own caucus? And with those members, have they expressed any concern about what giving climate change this profile might do to their electoral change?
No. Look, I would just speak in general. The members of our caucus believe in science. They may have some disagreements on how to approach the issue, which Senator King laid out. But I don't know of anyone in our caucus that denies the fact that this is happening. More questions?
Senator?
Yes, over here.
Steve Scott, Bloomberg BNA. A question on strategy in terms of, I think there's a mention of amendments as perhaps one legislative strategy. And I wonder if you could distinguish sort of the focus there. Would we see amendments to address climate change in a sort of proactive manner? Or are you thinking here more in terms of defending against your public?
Well, I'm going to just talk about what we've discussed so far. This is something that's going to be, these decisions are going to be made week by week, month by month, and you will hear from us very, very often. But let me tell you, as far as legislation is concerned, we know we have to fight back against rollbacks. This is a huge issue, and a few of us have done that alone. Now we have a task force dedicated. Oh, hi, Richard. We're going to hear from you in a minute. We have a task force now that is going to be at the ready because the biggest fight we're going to have is to keep the progress we've already made. And Senator Cardin laid out the progress. Let me assure you that there are those on the other side of the aisle who want to repeal the progress. So in terms of legislative action, that's certainly there. As far as action on renewable fuels, which we've discussed with you before, action on energy efficiency in housing and other areas, fuel economy, of course, we'll be dealing with those at this time. But as I said at the beginning, we're well aware of the limitations that we have facing us on the floor. That's why Waking Up Congress is the prime push here. We'll be doing it with speeches, press conferences like this, specific actions that will be very exciting, I can tell you, that we will be laying out, which will involve not only the people inside this complex, but outside this complex. And with that, we're going to close with comments from Senator Blumenthal.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I don't mean to be the closer here, but thank you for your leadership, Barbara. Thank you to Sheldon Whitehouse for his really repeated reminders about the critical importance of this topic. You know, if you look at the senators here and you look at this issue, it clearly is one that cuts across every divide in this country. Every issue is related, whether it is the small business issues or our shorelines, our trade issues, health issues. They all somehow come back to the quality of our environment and ultimately the quality of our life. So I'm just very excited to be a part of this group, which is going to continue. I think that it needs to be as tireless and relentless as Barbara Boxer is always in everything she does, and Sheldon the same. But I think that we have a nucleus here of a great group that can drive this issue despite the perhaps lack of attention in the political sphere right now. I think it's an issue whose time has come, and people get it. When you look at Sandy, the Superstorm Sandy, its effect on Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, other storms, other natural disasters, people really understand that the polar vortex is not an isolated incident, that it is part of our time. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the thing. We're going to close now because we have a lunch. I'll hang around out there if anybody has questions, and so will Senator Whitehouse and any others who want to. But I recently heard just a wonderful fact that I didn't know, and maybe everybody else knows it, so anyhow, this is what it is. That birds fly in formation much faster than they do individually. And what I want to say is that each of us has a passion on this issue. You could tell by listening to us. This is not something that we're doing for any other reason other than we have to save the planet for our grandkids, all of our grandkids. So we're together. We're together. We respect each other. The ideas that are going to come from each of us, we're going to carry them out. They're going to be exciting, different, and we look forward to sharing those with you. Thank you very much.